Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the Islamic Vice podcast. I'm your host, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts, Brother JK and Brother Kam. Assalamu alaikum, brothers, and welcome to the show.
Walaikum assalam wa
Walaikum
rahmatullahi
assalam.
wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair for
MashaAllah. I was
inviting
going to
us.
ask how you're doing, and you responded straight away by saying, Alhamdulillah, you're doing well.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. All good. All good on this side.
That's good. That's good. JK, how's things, man?
Yeah, good. Alhamdulillah, not too bad. Not too bad. How's things with you?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Things are going all right. Lots cracking off. So
Yeah.
we did record the podcast, a really good podcast actually. Just a quick plug for those who have probably missed it. Last week we recorded podcast. What was the topic again? Cheeky, what was the topic?
It was on Masa Amini, the hijab protest. and all that.
Yes. So because that's still cracking off, but everyone should really go and check that out because it gives a good understanding on what's kicking off in Iran at the moment and what not to believe from the mainstream media. Cool, man. Inshallah, let's get into this one then. So we saw yesterday Kwasi Kwarteng. He was sacked as the Chancellor and replaced by Jeremy Hunt. And as we know, since Liz Truss has become Prime Minister, right, and along with her bold approach on the economy, which is also known as I think they call it Trussonomics.
Yeah.
Trussonomics.
Trussonomics.
Yeah, weird name, but yes, it's been like a whirlwind period in British politics, and with Kwasi sacking yesterday, it looks like he's actually being used as a scapegoat by the Truss government, and with the mini budget fiasco, and he's being blamed, and it's being blamed solely on him, and even though Liz Truss, has announced that a second U-turn on a major economic policy, which has actually resulted in the government borrowing cost, with the government borrowing costs increasing, and the pound actually, the value of the pound falling again. So it really looks like you might have heard that quote, "Dog eat dog." You know what I mean? Everyone is just in survival mode and pointing fingers at others. And even though with the U-turn, and we know Liz Truss, she scrapped a key policy to in order to which was to raise the corporation tax, and this has caused a lot of hoo-ha, and you've got many sort of like Tory MPs actually now calling for Liz Truss to be replaced. I mean, she's been in the job for a couple of months now, so that's quite mad. And at the same time, though, you have got others who are talking about other ministers who are saying, look, it's not a good time to change the prime minister. It's a terrible idea because, we can't keep changing prime ministers. So as we can see, it's not a good time for, great British democracy for everyone to see. So there's loads to discuss in this topic, right? But I just want to get your thoughts initially on the news of Kwasi sacking and another Liz Truss U-turn. I'll start off with you, Cam, bro. What's your thoughts?
So I think this has been almost the abject failure of democracy we're seeing at the moment. And it's not the first time. We saw it with the Americans when Trump was in power. And we had a lot of content and a lot of ideas and thoughts that we could use from that era to say, look at, this is what democracy is. This is, you're voting for the lesser of the two evils, and they're both pretty evil. You don't really get much of another choice. And it's similar in this country, the Labour and the Conservative Party. Whoever gets into power, you're again voting for the lesser of the two evils. This is democracy. We call it elected dictatorship. And that's exactly what it is, because the other parties, you could start up an independent party or even join Lib Dems and all these other smaller parties, but they'll never get in, and they'll have to create a coalition to ever get any sort of power. So it's designed that way, because if there was no smaller parties, then when the two bigger parties come head to head and it's slightly, too close, they can just nick from the other party and just call it a coalition. But really, it's not. It's just a way of just getting over that 50% mark. And this is why we say democracy is flawed, and we can quite clearly see it, and the Ummah can quite clearly see it. And I think a good point to start on, rather than the actual details of the sacking and, or and like talking about Kwasi Kwarteng and all things like that. I think for the Muslims that are into this at the moment, there's a lot of Muslims talking about it, because obviously you live here, so you have that a bit of interest in it, because obviously you're living here, you're looking at the pound falling, you're looking at the energy prices going up, you're looking at your petrol costs going up, so you can't sit back and say, yeah, I'm not even looking at the issue, I don't care, whatever happens. That there's an element of that, yeah, but you're still looking at it, you're still quite curious about why it's going up and things like that. So a lot of the Muslims generally have a bit of interest in it. And for those Muslims, we really need to show them, look, this is what democracy is. This is what you want in our Muslim lands. This is how it would be. This is meant to be the beacon, like they say, beacon of democracy. America is supposed to be the beacon of freedoms. All this stuff. And really, it's been over the last 10 to 15 years, it's been an absolute shambles. I think since 9/11. Democracy, capitalism, all these liberalism, secularism have just been proper showed up, and I think that's a really key point to start on. I think.
Yeah. Subhanallah, straight in there, bro. Straight in there. JK, what are you saying?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, to be fair. I think, yeah, we can talk a bit about the detail, but the context we should be having this discussion in is, as Cam described, from an Islamic context. Okay, how does it affect us? What level of involvement should we have? We should, we should have interest. It is politics. It will impact the Ummah in some way or another, especially from the global side. And seeing capitalism, fail is positive, actually, even though it might impact our lives negatively. We need to look at it in the bigger picture. But I think some of the examples, just to give, related to this case, and also how it shows the failure of capitalism, is the reason Kwasi Kwarteng was sacked, or used as a scapegoat, as well as the fact that Liz Truss is on her last days, I'd say. I think it's counting, although we can talk about that, because I think the Conservative Party will play a bit of strategy here, because they are not popular at the moment, and they'll lose a landslide loss if it went to general elections. Anyway, we'll talk about that. But just touching on the point around capitalism, the main point, Kwasi Kwarteng has failed, and he turned out to be the second shortest reign in that position, right? And I was like, who's the first? So I searched who's the first, right? And that first person died. It wasn't like he got removed.
Within
The
30
reason
days.
it was short, it was 30 days in office over something he couldn't control. He died. So in fact, Kwasi Kwarteng is the shortest, to be sacked in that position. Anyway, the point I was going to make, the main bit is around the mini budget, right? And the reason the mini budget was such a catastrophe was because it was so pro-capitalist in a time which, obviously, we're suffering from the energy crisis, we're suffering from the cost of living crisis. Deception is one thing, and we know they apply deception at many times to ensure that the rich get richer and the poor suffer. But what bad timing! So some policies, just to speak about, you mentioned one of them, which was around the corporation tax cut, which was planned. There's been a U-turn on that. So that happened yesterday. Liz Truss confirmed that you're going to do a U-turn, and that won't be cancelled. And the other one that they've done a U-turn on was the 45% tax rate, which was essentially they were going to have a 45% tax rate on those who earn more than 150k, but because of the reaction from their own party members and the opposition, as well as the market, which is the main reason, the market reacted so badly to that that they had to reverse and do a U-turn on that. But both policies are very pro-capitalist, right? Because it ensures that their rich friends, that the Conservative Party generally are known, they're known to be more of the upper echelons of society. They won't get their perks that they thought they would. But the other few to mention of the mini budget that may still have, there might be more U-turns and potentially a scrapping of the whole thing, is the limit on bankers' bonuses. So that was going to come in, a limit on bankers' bonus, so they can't earn too much. They were going to scrap that as well. Again, another pro-capitalist policy. And then from the other side, like universal credit, they had a policy that those who are on universal credit have to do more to prove that they can find work. And the other thing about there would be no real increase in benefits. So obviously there's inflation going on. Other places, so for pensioners, there was a real increase in pensions. And who are pensioners? Pensioners are generally those who are generally the richer, because they get affected by that. But those who are on benefits there would be no real increase. So my point is, all of these policies in the mini budget was like capitalism on speed. It was very pro-capitalist, anti-working class. So the reason that it was such a catastrophe is that who votes for, the voting is a majority, really, isn't it? Although democracy is a shambles, as Cam mentioned, you still need some sort of representation to go into power. So seeing this, the Conservative Party themselves, their MPs, they've turned against Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, obviously, as well as the opposition. Obviously, I've gone on a rampage to kind of really go against what Truss has said, and they'll lose if a general election happens. So I think the key point for me is that this whole episode that we're seeing here really exposes capitalism, exposes their system, and the anti-democraticness of it, in the sense that I'm not promoting democracy, but they themselves have not followed democracy. Liz Truss is unelected. She was not elected by the public. She wasn't even elected by the MPs. So she wasn't elected by members of parliament that had got their seat. She was actually elected by the
own party,
the Conservative members, who are not elected. No one votes for them. They just pay a fee to be a member. So, and the same happened for Boris Johnson. At one point, he was unelected. Theresa May. So this system itself promotes something that they call democracy, but is in effect, like Cam said, elected to take dictatorship. And at some points, direct dictatorship, they're just put into power whoever they want. So I think that's the context we should be discussing these recent events, and we should also hopefully speak about the Islamic alternative to this system.
Yeah.
One thing though, before I come to you, Cam, a question is that obviously we know that the Conservatives are New Labour is not a lot different, but Conservatives is the pro capitalist type of party, right? So some may see that actually, with people speaking out against like Tory members of the parliament, MPs speaking out against this capitalism on speed policies by that Liz Truss was trying to get through, it may well seem like, oh, it's because they disagree with the policy of the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, right? But the reality is that what we see is that there's an general election coming up soon, and we can also see that from the last election, right? And one of the big factors in Boris Johnson winning was due to what they call the red wall, which was all those people who have always voted Labour, who obviously they fell into the if you just watch the Al Jazeera files, Labour files, they fell into the propaganda against Corbyn. However, what Keir Starmer's been saying is, we need to bring the red wall back online, right? Back on our side. So what we can see is that this isn't because these MPs of the Conservative Party care about the people or going through difficult times or cost of living and all this sort of stuff. Is because they understand that these policies that are being pushed, right, could lead to a loss in the general election. So again, it's like more based on their own survival rather than the good of the people.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, I think what I was going to add, and it's similar to the point that you've just made there as well, actually. When we say who sort of voted for Conservative, right? People do vote. We know that they do vote in this country, and it's not like we're not saying, oh, it's a fixed vote and the capitalists, there's a shadow capitalists that are just choosing who the government is. No, they vote, but what they use is the tool they've used since probably from the 1700s is when they established multimedia, mass media, newspapers in the back in the days, to now multimedia, news, radio, YouTube, whatever all the media they decide to use. That is their way of now controlling the masses. So this is something I've seen in the last 10 to 15 years since I've had a bit of DAB radio in my car. I listen to the LBCs and the talk radios pretty much. I don't, obviously don't listen to music much, but I'm always just on those channels, and they're quite interesting to gauge the media first, and also sometimes the callers, the types of callers that get through, because you have to remember on these stations they call in before they get on live. They get checked. They tell the other person what they're going to say, and then they get put on. So it is filtered down. Prior to or during the Corbyn era, it was an absolute onslaught on Labour, like on radio. It was not, you wouldn't, if they did a stat on it, it would be astonishing. It would probably be like 99% anti-Labour. Because I never, for that 10, 15 years driving to work, I never heard a single benefit or plus point on Labour. And it was purely just propping up. Firstly, obviously, back before that, it was David Cameron. They were propping up. Then they propped up Boris Johnson. And they basically propped up the Conservative Party so much. But then obviously there came a point where they couldn't not talk about what Boris Johnson was doing. They had a plan that they're going to obviously remove him and get someone else in, right? But recently, since the crash, or what we're going to probably see crash if the volatility continues in the market, since the mini budget came out, there has been a complete U-turn on the radio. They constantly bringing on Labour callers and and even Conservative callers, but the Labour callers get to put all their points across to why we should hate Conservative, and they make very good points, because obviously you can rip Conservative Party if you wanted to, because they've been in power for so long and they've done so much wrong, right? There's so much to talk about, there's so much to rip into. But then instead of bringing on the Conservative voters that are going to be like, giving some good points, they only bring on those that are switching to Labour.
Yeah.
So they're all coming on and saying, yeah, I've had enough of the Labour, Conservative. On the next general election, I'm switching over. You hear that every single day for the next month. I assure you, every single Conservative member that's been listening to the radio, they'll be all Labour next election, because this is mass media. This is how media works. This is how this is how they control the masses, and they've been doing that. And they did it with Brexit. They did it with Conservative getting in power and Boris Johnson coming in and just basically propping up the capitalists for a long time. They probably wanted to do it for what's her name, Truss, because obviously of all the pro-capitalist policies that she's been doing. But as soon as the market volatility hit in, that's like the red line, I'd say, for capitalists. It's a red line. You can't mess around with the pound. You're messing around with their investments. They're losing trillions, billions. As soon as that fluctuates, they crap themselves.
Yeah.
So I think that was the red line, and that's why we're seeing on mass media they've just put out an instruction. Who pays for all these media stations? It's ultra capitalists. They've said, you guys don't bring on don't bring on the Conservative members that are going to prop up Conservative. Bring on the ones that are going to switch to Labour, and get Labour's voices on. And all of a sudden, even on the news reports, they come on and they starting to play Keir Starmer's points against Truss, rather than back in the days you'd see they'd always play Boris Johnson's points against Corbyn, because they're like, look how stupid Corbyn is. Look, but this is how Boris Johnson basically drilled into him. And now it's opposite. Now they're playing all of Keir Starmer's points that he's drilling into Truss. So you can just see it's clear as day if anyone's been listening to the radio. And I thought, that's just like you were saying. This is why they vote for Conservative, because the media was on the Conservative side for so long. So there are people voted. But now, if the media continue to switch like they have done, I believe that next election's most definitely going to be Labour, and Labour are going to have to basically wash down their policies and make them more pro-capitalist, because they've probably been approached to say, you'll get the next election, but do these things and the media will stay on your side.
And the reality is, Keir Starmer is pro-capitalist. You wouldn't call him that left-leaning. He's a Blairite. It's the way Tony Blair won in 1997 or whatever it was, because they weren't really left-leaning. They're essentially on the fringes of where Conservative are, more left to where they are, but essentially centre-right. And And if you've watched, I haven't finished watching it, but if you watched the Labour files, you'll see actually they were on an onslaught against Corbyn and they played dirty tactics against him. And the reason is because he's too radical for them. He's too radical. His changes, what he was his policies were genuinely left policies that were not pro-capitalists, and they were not ready for someone like that. And but he had popularity. This guy would have won an election if it wasn't such an onslaught that you spoke about. He had popularity against among the mass public, but because they went against him, they used this anti-Semitism. They exaggerated it against him. He lost, right? And the Labour Party themselves, they said, "Oh, you're unelectable. We need someone like Starmer." Starmer's nothing great, but he's not a Corbynite. Basically, he's not of a Corbyn ilk. He's more Blairite. So they know, and this system itself has what you call protection mechanisms. They won't allow for certain types of thought to get in. There's only so much, and they give you the illusion of choice, so you can vote for Labour, Conservatives, Lib Dem, whoever you want, and there's differences in policies, yeah. But actually, a lot of it is very similar. The Conservative policies recently have been copycat of what Labour's been pushing anyway. So even that the EPG, the energy price guarantee, which was the £2,500 cap on energy price, that itself was a Labour policy. They just adopted it. So it's what you said, Cam. Like the mass media will push for whoever they want. And when you say mass media, this is the deep state essentially.
Yeah.
The deep state will push for who they want in power. And just to add to Maj's point around, one is, yes, you're right, that the Conservative MPs, they don't care about the people. They're not there for that. They're there for themselves, right? So they will only care about what gets them elected. How does the Conservative Party stay in power? How would they continue to be elected as in their localities? But the other thing is, like Cam said, is also the market. So this Liz Truss's mini budget and Kwasi Kwarteng's mini budget, it shook the market. And some people might argue, how? Because actually they were pushing policies that would be better for the capitalists. Got incorporation tax, right? That's what capitalists would want. The 45p tax rate being removed, again, a pro-capitalist policy. Why did the market react in such a way? And the reason is, the market's not stupid. The things they're funding need to be funded. So that this EPG, energy price guarantee, there was no explanation of how it's going to get funded. Because they spoke about windfall tax. Again, that's another pro-cap. They could have done a windfall tax against energy giants, but they said, no, we won't do that because it's all about capitalism, right? We're going to help our friends. And the market is basically based on certainty and uncertainty. The market requires consistency, stability, certainty.
But they needed to
when
give
it doesn't
give it a
have
method.
that, yeah, exactly. When it doesn't have that, then people won't invest. People won't, because there's no certainty. Regardless of the policies, if there's no certainty, people will hold on to their money. And if people hold on to their money, that's it. The pound crashes, the market crashes. And that's exactly what happened. And then Liz Truss, so people thought that the market would raise up again when Kwasi Kwarteng got sacked. They thought, yeah, now the market will react positively. But even these interviews that the Prime Minister has been giving, total incompetence. Rather than saying, look, hold my hands up, got it wrong, we're going to go back to, whiteboard. What she said is, oh, it's the wrong time. So she's still back to policy, but she said wrong time. So that doesn't give confidence in the market that she's got a plan.
And bro,
So-
the reporters were blazing her.
Well, Lee, she's totally incompetent. I don't know how she's in power. It's madness. Crazy.
But you mentioned the illusion, right? It's an illusion, and in the old days there used to be a slogan, democracy is hypocrisy, right? Which was quite popular. But if you think about it, really, it is an illusion. The fact that you're telling people, and still, I mean, what we're talking about here, when we say people, we're not talking about masses and masses, because you just need to look at the election turnout rate, right? How many people actually vote, how many people have got confidence in it. And that's why a lot of people and the Labour membership grew after Corbyn became Labour, head of Labour, is because they thought there's going to actually be a change, okay? But what we can see is that the reality is like you said, you've got a basket full of rotting apples, right? Some are more rotten than others, and you're giving people the illusion of which one do you want. In reality, right, you don't want any,
No.
right? But if people are hungry, they're gonna have to pick something, right? And that's why, if you really think about it, it just goes to show that the people, like Cam was saying, people can be swayed to make those choices where, even though they still think they are going into the voting center and they are putting a tick somewhere, but they don't understand, or they don't realize they've actually been programmed. Even that's not done with their own volition, their own will. It's done because of the choice they're making has been influenced, right? So it just goes to show that it's all an illusion. And like Cam started off talking about the democracy failing, and the reality is that we've mentioned many times before, and when we talk about democracy, and we talk about from an Islamic point of view, here what you're talking about is a system which has been designed and which has been then implemented and by human beings, in the sense like they've come up with this idea, they've made this up, right? So as human nature, we know that, can one human being really produce a universal system that's going to satisfy everyone's needs? That's not going to happen. And if you look at certainly here, and the examples you lot are given, is that this system is really designed to benefit the capitalists, benefit the super rich. And in fact, feudal Europe, that system was there to design the barons, and was to benefit the barons, the kings, the clergy, right? And since then up until now, yeah, a little bit's changed. The illusion of freedom is there. The illusion of being able to make it is there. But in reality, it's the same thing, that there's a handful group of people who will benefit. But we shouldn't be surprised about this, because what we're saying is that, look, from an Islamic point of view, that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that can actually provide a system which can actually organize and manage society, right, in the way that it should, that in the way that the human being has been designed to do so. Anything else, whether it's capitalism, whether it's communism, or any other ism, right, it's not going to work. So what we're seeing here, the disparity and the contradictions, and the fact that so I was reading today that there was one MP. What he said is, I don't want a change in prime minister, because what's going to happen is that the replacement isn't going to be decided by the Tory party. And he didn't even mention the masses, but he said the Tory party. He said it's going to be the Tory members. So here, what you've got is, the Tory members, are they really best? Are they in the best position to be able to choose the leader? Do they know more about politics, as an example, than the members of parliament?
Yeah, and the reality was that Truss had no popularity among the MPs. It was
Bro,
Rishi.
how could she, man? Come on,
Yeah,
bro.
exactly.
She's a joke.
Yeah. So they knew it, but it was the members who, probably mostly white, middle-aged men, who would never want an Asian guy to be prime minister anyway, even though he's
Actually,
very
that's a good.
privileged.
That's a good
Yeah.
point.
No,
That's
100%, 100%.
that's
They're not ready for that anyway. I mean, it might happen now because of what they're in, but yeah, that's a key point, that these are members of the party, Conservative Party. Think of your generic. I'm not talking about voters. I'm not members. These are the ones that are fully loyal to the Conservative Party. So yeah. So the reality was that if the MPs had voted, they wouldn't have voted Truss.
Yeah.
They would have voted probably Rishi, maybe.
Yeah. And just on the point of just like the Islamic angle to all of this, obviously we know you can talk about that, the failure of democracy as a system, because it's from man, and we know that there's going to be a lot of examples from just talking about how that system was thought of and how it implements itself. But then you have to remember the people that are going to implement it are going to be non-Muslim. They've also got more flaws. They've got they don't have the values from Islamic culture. They are only there for themselves. Their whole criteria in life is benefit. So even for themselves, they're not just taking away the system just for themselves. They're going to be looking at their own benefit, right? Because that's the sort of person they're all going to be. So it's not just the system that's going to be messed up. It's going to be people that are coming into the system, that are propping up the system or being part of the system. That's also so. For example, when they can see that the country is in crisis, right? The war in Ukraine is hammering the gas prices, oil prices. They can see that, you know, they need a strong leader. They know that in the next election they're probably going to lose. So where your likes of these lot, and these are the people that are still in MPs, William Hague, because he's still around. There's John Major, he's still around. There's always been in history. There's always been previous prime ministers come up again and take the realm and say, "What the hell is going on? Let's get back on track." You know, John Major, David Cameron's still there. There's Michael Gove. He backstabbed too many people. He probably can't get in anymore since what he did with Boris Johnson and stuff. There's obviously Jeremy Hunt. Why didn't he go for it? Why is he coming in to now fix the budget? Why didn't he go for leadership? You know, none of these guys. There's George Osborne. There's Philip Hammond. There's all of these big characters in the Conservative Party. None of them went for the leadership campaign. Why? Because they don't care about the country. If they cared about the country, they would have went in and said, and they would have wiped Rishi Sunak and trust straight away. Everyone, it wouldn't even take that long. It would be within the first week. They'd be like, just give it to this guy. He's got 100% of the votes already, you know. But why did they all abstain? Because they know the next election is going to be too difficult for them to win. So it's going to be a mark on their history. They're going to be a leader of the Conservative Party who lost against Labour and give Labour the reign. So it shows, look, this is their type of politician. Look at the Muslim politician, though. The absolute opposite. They wouldn't care about anything in terms of their own sort of ego. They would have went forward. Look, this is for the Islamic Ummah. They would have been pushed forward. They wouldn't be. They don't need to come out and say, "Oh, you know, I want to be leader." The Ummah would have grabbed them and said, "Go lead. You're the most capable person." And they might turn around and say, "No, I don't want to lead," but they'll be forced to. So why couldn't their society to say, "No, we want this guy"? Forget David. Yeah, David. What's his name? Boris Johnson was an absolute, you know, joke. Let's get someone like John Major back in, or William Hague, or David Cameron, or whatever. They can't do that because their system's not set up like that. That person has to opt to go in and opt to save the country. So that's again another angle to take with Muslims is look at the values of anything non-Islam. This is what the sort of politicians you get. It's not politicians. Politics is about serving, looking after the affairs of the people. This is purely looking after the self-interest. And that's what it is at the moment we're seeing. It's purely self-interest. That's why all the inadequate, all those power-grabbing Conservative MPs went for power. Because they know this is the only chance. All the big dogs are going to sit down. I'm going to get a bit of fame. I'm going to go and, you know, the Rishi Sunaks and stuff, they backstab to get this leadership contest going. You know, they stepped down and basically backstabbed Boris Johnson so that they can become next leader. So it's all the little ones, all the little hyenas in the background that wanted the power. But the big dog said, take it. You're going to lose the next election most likely. I'm not going to take it. So you have to, that's a really good angle to use as well.
Yeah, that's a solid point. And it really does highlight their type of politics, you know, which people know to be dirty and very much about backstabbing, very much about looking after their own selves and their own pockets. Whereas, like you said, from an Islamic perspective, the reality was the leaders were pushed forward. They didn't want that because there's a responsibility. It wasn't a case of power. It was a responsibility. You know, we've had many narrations, many cases of Omar, Abu Bakr speaking about the immense responsibility of being a leader. The fact that you're accountable for everyone's affairs, even the animals, you'll be accountable for. So this is the real politician, and we should think in a similar way. What does it really mean to be a politician who thinks about the affairs of the people, not about, you know, growth in ridiculous. They call it trickle-down economics. So the idea here is that you cut taxes, you make investment attractive for the rich. The rich will then invest, they'll spend more money, the economy will grow, and that growth in the economy will help everyone. That's the theory of trickle down. But the reality is what happens is actually you serve the rich, their pockets grow, they don't reinvest. And when they do reinvest, it's to help themselves, not just help the people. They don't go and employ more people. It just doesn't happen. I mean, there's studies showing that the trickle-down economics is an illusion, is a fallacy. There is no trickle-down economics, but they will use it because theory sounds good, right? The theory sounds like, oh, okay, yeah, that's how we. And from a capitalist perspective, their sole objective of capitalism is about economics. Actually, that the economic system in capitalism is the core bit of the ideology, because for them money is everything, and their sole objective is to increase production. Right, their problem, the way they view progress is about how do you increase GDP, gross domestic product. So anything they will do is about increasing production. They don't actually care about whether that leads to greater inequality, whether that leads to more people being poor, because as long as you got GDP going up, then it's all good. Because who wins? The capitalists win, the rich win. So that's who they care about, right? Whereas in an Islamic viewpoint towards economics, it's not that. The Islamic viewpoint is not. So they obviously their problem is that there's too many wants, not enough resources. That's a capitalist problem, right? Totally false. Actually,
Oh, we lost him.
problem.
Jackie, you just for a second there, you just glitched out. So to repeat that point.
What I was saying is that the Islamic viewpoint of the economic problem is totally different to how the capitalists view it. So Islam says actually it's about there is enough resources to fulfill the needs of the people, because the needs of the people are not unlimited. The needs of the people are limited, because actually, there's only so much of, we define need very clearly. A need is about that what you really need. So shelter, being able to eat, being able to, the basic needs of any human.
I think the key difference here is between needs and wants.
Exactly. They put needs and wants in one basket. We make a distinction. The need is your fundamental need: shelter, the fact that you need clothing, the fact that you need to eat, the fact that the basic resources. That's the need, right? So in Islam, that you can satisfy that, and the Islamic system and the politician seeks to ensure that the people, everyone, has their basic needs satisfied. And in the case where it's not, that's rare, right? That's rare, because actually that will be a case where there might be a famine or something like that. And there's other things that they will do to make sure that those who are suffering the worst are served, and the people will come to help as well, because that's, it's a rare case. So because Islam views it like this, that it's about making sure the basic needs of everyone is met, then you don't have this boom bust economy. You have a stable economy, stable for investment, halal investment, obviously. It's quite difficult to compare because their system is very riba-based, interest-based. It's not a clear comparison, but generally speaking, and by principle, the Islamic system really leads to prosperity and equality. We're talking about the distribution of resources is so much more equal than the capitalist system, where you have immense inequality, where the rich, I can't remember what the percentage was, but something silly like the richest 10%. I can't remember what the stat is, but the richest 1% own most of the resources in the world, or something like that.
90% or something, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to step back and think about this, rather than getting stuck in the system. As people say, same toilet, different. I'll let you finish the sentence. That's what capitalism is, right? So it's the same system.
Yeah.
The faces may change, but actually the system remains. Regardless of whether it's Labour, Conservatives, the system remains, and that system needs to be questioned rather than the faces.
But that reminds me of a really good point that Rush made in last week's podcast, when he was talking about how the West is secular, supposedly secular. However, they're more than happy to allow a Jewish state, right, or a Hindutva state, i.e. countries where basically their religion it makes up their identity. It's not really secular. Okay, it's not secular. However, and what Rash said, that if there was no hypocrisy and contradiction and double standards, then what would be the problem with a Islamic state, right? And the problem is because they know Islamic history. People today, even Muslims have maybe, we've disconnected from our history when it comes down to how the Muslims managed society, how they ruled, how they were in power, how they dealt with people's problems, right? But these guys know. They know this. So everything you're talking about there, JK, they know this. So for them, it's not even it's not a possibility at all for them to allow a Islamic state to appear, because when it does and it starts to implement the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and it starts to deal with the social problems, the economic problems, where, for example, the natural resources like gold, like oil and gas, these are basically owned by the Ummah, and these are there for the benefit of the Ummah, right? When these things happen, when you have now zakah being distributed amongst people and all these other things, right? They will then be able to see that actually, wait a minute, we gotta hide this from our people, because if our masses see this, just think about it. You mentioned earlier about the amount of people, labor membership, how much it grew, and obviously, if you watch the labor files, it talks about it in that when Corbyn came on the scene with his left-leaning ideas. Not that I'm saying Islam's left or anything, but the point I'm making is that there were a lot of people, and there were majority of them were young, from the young masses, right? Young people, that when he came on the scene and they thought, actually, we got someone who might do something for the betterment of actually people rather than their mates, and with the deep pockets, right? They try to get involved in the politics. Before that, they were they weren't interested.
Fed up. Yeah,
they were fed up. They were interested. Now imagine now you have a system that's being implemented on people, which now has also satellite channels which can beam debates, discourse, debates between Islam and secularism, and proving of the Quran is the speech of Allah, and proving that Allah is the creator exists, and all these type of things, right? And this is being beamed into the homes of people in the same way how the capitalists were beaming it into the Soviet Union, right? All those people that are already fed up, they don't vote, they're not interested, right? They just carry on their day. Their day is, they get up, they work if they've got a job, then they'll just pay the bills, and then eventually they'll die in a in a cold front room, and somebody will find them in a couple of weeks' time, right? This is the future of people here. However, when these people now see this, you're trying to tell me that they won't think, actually, wait a minute, we would like to live like that, right? Why are our leaders looking after our affairs like these people? This is why it's impossible. And just one last point, Jake, and then come to you. I've seen a video today, someone shared it, and there was this sheikh, and he was talking about how the West. He was talking about the term Islamists, and he said basically that had the West declared war on Islam, then they would have been declaring war on 2 billion Muslims. But what they did was they declared war on Islamists. And what this did was actually many Muslims even joined their campaigns against what they perceived as the Islamists, right? But this is a war against Islam. And what he was saying is that, the Islamist is the term of the enemy. When you hear people talking about Islamists, they're talking about Islam, right? And the reason why they have to do these type of things is because they cannot afford to allow the deen of Islam to be implemented on the earth, because in the same way the Quraysh fought tooth and nail against the Messenger, someone who was their relative, someone who was from their tribe. They broke all the traditions of the Arabs, went against their own families. Why? Because of survival, of their own interests, right? And that's exactly what these people are doing today. Sorry, Jackie, you want to make a point?
Yeah, no, 100%. That's a very interesting point as well about the Islamist. Because if you think about it, how do you define Islamist? Islamist is the one who wants Islam to be in politics. That's how they would define it.
That's how they define it, because there's no such word as Islam.
There's no such thing. It's just a Muslim. What I'm trying to say is, which Muslim wouldn't want Islam to be in politics? You know, by their definition, Muhammad Sallallahu was an Islamist.
100%.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, so that's it. They want a secular Muslim, and that's what they're trying to push. Obviously, we know that. So to them, they've defined this term because, as you said, they can't make it that blatant that they're going to war with the deen of Islam. When in reality, they are. But on your previous point about like political apathy and people being fed up of the system, but actually when they saw some sort of alternative, and when you talk about alternative here, Corbyn wasn't really that much of an alternative. He for them he was radical, but he was still promoting the same system.
I think he was, as an alternative, I think it might have been not so much about the policies.
No,
it's just the fact that this guy was seen as truthful and cared about people.
Yeah, exactly.
You can see the standard. You
Yeah.
can see what they view of the politicians now.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, 100%. So for
Can't
them,
be an
that is a
honest
change.
politician.
Yeah.
They can't be you can't be an honest politician in
No, you can't. The system doesn't allow you to be an honest politician. So, that's why he gained so much popularity. But even that, like you said, galvanized people thinking, oh, actually, there is an alternative. There is actual can distinguish between the parties here because he's pushing this and someone. So if that allows for people to become a bit more politically active and interested, then, like you said, if you have a genuine alternative, which you don't have today,
No,
because when you say this point about they won't want Islam, an Islamic state, they'll allow for other states, religious states, but not Islamic state. You're right. You're absolutely. It's hypocrisy. But also, when they do allow for an quasi, and not to, I think it's the term quasi state, like something that claims to be a state, like the Saudi state, for example, and the Iranian Islamic Republic, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. I mean, these are oxymorons anyway, because republic in itself means secular. So how can you be an Islamic Republic? It doesn't make sense. But anyway, they'll only allow it in terms of title. But when it comes to substance, they won't allow it. And secondly, where there is elements of the Islamic system coming into play because of the previous social system, they will fight tooth and nail to go against it. So what you saw in Iran, obviously, yes, what the Iranian state did was wrong, but I'm not going to repeat what you guys said. But actually, they took the opportunity to, fight, tackle, and make an onslaught against the woman's dress code. The hypocrisy was next level in the, people, the French and stuff getting involved. It's ridiculous. But also, like even Saudi, like recently, Saudi, and we know what path Saudi is going down, but they've spoken about removing the mahram laws for going to Ummah, right? So I know they were talking about it anyway, but they've decided now. So those who go to women who want to go Ummah, if they want to go by themselves, cool, you go. So these things, even where there was an element of Islamic rule, they're scared of, they're threatened by, so they will tackle.
They do not want to link the word politics and Islam together.
No,
they can't stand it being in the same sentence, bro.
No. It's a threat to them. It's a threat, and it frightens them that even though we don't have that alternative, even the idea, the thought of it is enough to make them shiver. Not more than shiver, I
mean, just look at their tussle with China, or just say with Russia even. At the end of the day, it's all about self-interest. And these are not even Muslim states. So do you think if they can't stand how China is, trying to stay out of the the way the international setup is at the moment, right? and they want to bring them into this, then at the end of the day, it's like, do you really think that they're going to allow an Islamic state, which is actually the whole purpose of it is to implement Islam, but also to remove kufr, right? So they'll stand no chance, because they would know at some stage the armies of the Muslim forces will be heading their direction. If you look at China doesn't really have that aspiration as such. However, it's a threat in that respect. They want to bring it in. They want to make sure it abides by their laws, right? So it just goes to show it's all about survival of the fittest. It's all about your self-interest. And when we're looking at these issues within the local politics, within the Conservative Party, within what Liz Truss has done, what Kwasi being the sacrificial lamb, all it is dirty politics, and that's why hence the name dirty politics, right? Is because it's not so much about we're here in this role to serve people. It's to do with how can I make the better situation for myself. And what some people probably don't realize is these people that become prime ministers, their real payday starts soon as when they finish in office.
Yeah.
It's a career. It's a career. And you look at
that.
Abu Bakr radiallahu at Bani Saqifa, he didn't want to become the leader. Umar radiallahu had to, insist his hand, pull his hand out, told the people to give bay'ah to them. Right? So the people, what we see in Islam, the rulers were there to serve the people. And what we're seeing here really is it looks like as if you're there to serve the people, the nation, but in reality, I think you're there to serve yourself. It's a career at the end of the day.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, 100%. Even that story about Abu Bakr, he actually brought Omar forward, and I think it was Abdurrahman ibn Auf or someone. He brought them to the Ansar and the Muhajirun, pick from one of these two. These two are capable enough, and they were like, how can we be the leader amongst you when you're still alive? I mean, they knew the status of Abu Bakr. So it just, this is the true. This is what we need to be have as an expectation of our leaders. Not, I mean, these guys we don't even consider our leaders anyway. But what I'm trying to say is, we see leaders in the Muslim world who are of the same makeup of these people here. So we really need to have lofty ambitions, Islamic ambitions. Look to our history. Look to those who are rightly guided for our inspiration. Not none of these guys. These guys are a joke, really. And what's happened recently really exposes that.
Yeah, no, exactly, man, exactly. So I mean, to be honest with you, I think one of the key messages takeaway messages, I think, would be the fact that the mess that we see, whether I mean, just say in the West, or you can even just talk about, I mean, not even that, even in the East, in the Muslim lands, there's a mess there, isn't it? Why? Because the application of Islam is not there. But what we can see is that in the West, where the politicians are really trying to serve their own interests, trying to serve the interests of those people of influence. I mean, you look at Liz Truss, and she was talking about moving the British embassy to Jerusalem. Why is that? Is because she wants to gain favor of a certain faction, right? So people will do these things. I think that
she said she's a Zionist, didn't she, to them?
Yeah, she was. I'm a huge Zionist, right? So I think the key takeaway really is the fact that, as Kam said in his first point, is that we as Muslims we need to look at it from an Islamic lens, and the Islamic lens wouldn't be befitting for us to be moaning about policies about oh, this is going to affect me, this is going to affect my cost of living and stuff like that. The angle we need to look at it is the fact that when humans are trying to solve problems of other humans, then this will always lead to failure, is because humans are not capable. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sovereign. He is the creator. And that's why rather than getting caught up in it, I think it's important to understand your deen, to understand your history, so that when we're discussing with other Muslims and also with non-Muslims who are talking about the issues of cost of living and the joke Liz Truss, and is that we can portray or we can promote a view which is in line with Islam, the fact that this is going to happen because it's a man-made system. And I think from a Muslim point of view, I think that's really important. And we've got loads of examples. I mean, just look at the Kwasi geezer. I mean, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, the guy was the main man. He was like him and Liz Truss were best pals and everything. But soon as the moment came, man was thrown under the bus because it's dirty politics. And I think one last thing I just want to add and get your thoughts as well, your final thoughts, brothers, is that you see why Muslims try to distance Islam from politics is because this is the politics they see. And that's why they say Islam and politics, Islam can't have anything to do with politics, is because they just see a dirty game, right? And they want to protect Islam. They know Islam is pure. But it's just that their understanding of what politics isn't entirely correct. As Kam mentioned a bit earlier, politics is looking after the affair, governing the affairs of the people. And, whether you do it with a secular system or whether you do it in an Islamic system, you're both doing the same. You understand? Politics is universal. It doesn't belong to any ideology or any certain belief. However, when we look at the politics here, yes, Islam is free of that politics, 100%. JK, what you say?
Yeah, 100% agree. I think the sad reality is that these people that are in power, even in the UK, people suffer as a result of some of their policies. There's people out there making decisions between whether they eat or they heat because of what the economy's got to.
Bro, just think about that.
It's mad.
People back in Bangladesh and Pakistan still think that the streets are paved with gold.
Yeah.
You think that would be a reality for them?
Exactly. It's madness.
That you eat or you heat.
Exactly.
Mad.
That's real life. That is decisions what people are having to make. And it's not, this is not a natural disaster. Forget forget this whole debacle of what's happened with Liz Truss. Even before that, they're blaming Russia for the energy crisis, but they only has an impact, but they only export 3%, import 3% of Russian gas, so they're not that reliant on Russia.
They only use it as an excuse.
It's an excuse, totally an excuse. There's their decisions that have led to this. The fact that they promote their own, capitalist thought, capitalist ideas, has led to the decadence that we see. And I think for me, the final message really is really similar to what you said, that there is an alternative to this, and sometimes it can be quite difficult to see it because we're so ingrained in this system. It's all we've known, right? It's all we've known. We've never lived to see anything different to this. We weren't. I don't even know. I'm not promoting this, but I didn't even know about socialism or communism. Really, I heard about it probably when I was younger. It was going on, but truly, we've only seen capitalism, and we've seen capitalism on its knees, actually. And like I said, whilst there is some satisfaction you take from that, the sad reality is people suffer as a result of it. And this is the system, really, that they export to our Muslim lands. This is the system that they claim to be the greatest system since sliced bread. The thing that they want, they bomb our lands to smithereens and then want these lands to adopt, a secular system. For what? You guys don't. You guys haven't even managed to successfully implement it yourself. How are you proposing it as an alternative for our lands? So, I think the message for me is really we need to open our eyes a bit, step back, think about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger really brought for us. It was more than just our personal worships. It was to govern our lives, including the systems, right? The political system, the economic system, social system, legal system, whatever it may be. It's comprehensive, and it's there. We can see it. If we really want to, learn from some of these things that we see daily, we should educate ourselves on what that alternative is. Make sure we understand it, we adopt it, and we call for it, because that's what really is going to save mankind. And the Messenger ﷺ was rahmatul lil alameen, not because of his character, not because of his good manners, because what he brought was a mercy to mankind. So that which he brought, we should understand, and we should be continuing as the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair, bro. Come, any thoughts?
Yeah, just final thoughts. I think a more practical point from my side for the end. So for those Muslims that are watching and listening to this from the West, those Muslims, their actions should really be using this example of the abject failure of democracy as their ammunition for showing up democracy, and also then presenting the alternative, which is the Islamic solution and the Islamic governance. So that would be your action if you want to take any practical steps from what we're talking about today, because what that's going to do is going to lead to the Muslims realizing, that in the West, that look, that this system isn't obviously fit for mankind, and it's also a system full of errors and full of deviants and liars, and it's an absolute travesty, to be honest. And what that's going to do is when elections come around in Western countries, the odd Muslim might still go and vote, but when they're ticking that paper, they know that it doesn't mean anything. They know that they're just doing it because probably they've done it in the past 10, 15 years. They've done it all the time. But those Muslims you've affected now, and they know that there's an alternative solution. And when that alternative solution one day, inshallah, comes, they'll have no hesitation in supporting it or joining it. And for those Muslims that are listening, that are not in the West, that are in Muslim countries, look at our countries that we're living in the West, and take it as an example. That's what, like JK was saying, this is the example for them to look at and say, actually, this is what democracy is. This is what they're trying to feed us over here, spoon feed us, and tell us to get rid of obviously the systems that they're following at the moment is not Islamic, but at the same time we shouldn't be aspiring towards the Western systems like in Iran at the moment, and the protests and stuff, where the media, and there's probably a lot of sincere Muslims caught up in it all, because the media's there, and the media, like we were saying, the media is a tool of the capitalists, and it's a very, very successful tool, and that's why they've been using it for the last 100 years, and they haven't shifted. You would expect this to be some other new tool or some other way of controlling the mind, but they found this is to be actually the best method, and you can see the success from it. And that's why every other Western state, even when they're clashing with each other, the Chinese state, the Russian state, Chinese made TikTok. TikTok is purposefully made because they're trying to push their own values through that, and also control the values that are coming into their country. So they are all using it. They've all noticed media is the mechanism. This is the only mechanism today to control or mass control. So we need to be aware of that when they're pushing that in our countries, but instead look at the real news. Look at the real, what's happening, the facts that's happening in these Western countries, and then say, look, that's not nothing to do with us. We want our system. You guys can get out, and if you don't want to give it to us, then we're going to fight you for it. So that's what we need to take from two angles, for both the Muslims in the West and the Muslims not in the West.
Yeah, no, Jazakallah khair, bro. That was some practical advice there. And just to kind of build on that is the fact that when you are pointing this out, i.e. for the Muslims, just say in our lands where they're being promoted with this culture, is if they look into this, they can actually see that. I mean, we've spoken about how capitalism, oppresses people in regards to economy and stuff like that. But if you think about it, as a complete package, it's a complete package of destruction. It doesn't protect the mind. it doesn't protect the soul, it doesn't protect society, you know.
body.
So you got the body, you got liberalism, you got capitalism, you know, you got all these things now. So yeah, there may be a case of, you know, do I eat or do I heat? But at the same time, you got this mass confusion that's being pushed in schools and stuff like this. So, you know, it's like it's a failure in every possible way. And even if you look at it from the point of view of the earth, these mans are trying to, you know, they're thinking about doing hijrah to Mars, right? But what about the earth you're living on? You're destroying it, right? You're destroying it. So I think it's something which is important. And also, just to add as well, as a final point, is when Islam is being attacked, then you have to, as a Muslim, you know, be a someone who stands up for Islam and what it means to be Muslim and what Islam is. And for that, there's two key factors. A, you need to know what Islam is, and two, you need to know the other ideology as well, because only then can you point out the flaws and say, well, you're saying about Islam isn't true, but actually look in the mirror, because what you have, your face is far more uglier than anything you could even make up to point towards Islam and Muslims. So guys, Jazakallah khair for coming on the show. It was a really good discussion. I really definitely benefited from the points you guys have made, and I hope those people listening and watching will also benefit. And if you do benefit, people, brothers and sisters, then please share this with your family and friends and subscribe. And also on a YouTube channel, Path to Revival, you know, leave any comments on the podcast, and maybe even suggestions for future topics. So on that note, brothers, inshallah ta'ala, until we meet on the next one, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.